You lock eyes with someone across a crowded room. Your heart rate elevates. Your palms sweat. You think this is a modern romance. You believe you are making a conscious choice based on your unique personality and modern tastes. For about 300,000 years, this exact biological cascade has been playing out exactly the same way. How much of your attraction is actually your own conscious decision? Your brain is an ancient machine operating in a very modern world. It is running software written entirely during the Pleistocene epoch. This was a brutal time of vast, unforgiving savannas and constantly encroaching ice ages. You do not choose who you love. Your ancestors choose for you. You are sitting in a softly lit room with climate control and comfortable furniture. You feel completely removed from the harsh realities of the natural world. Yet beneath your skin, ancient survival mechanisms are firing with absolute precision. Your pupils dilate to take in more light and capture more visual data. Your blood pressure rises to prepare your muscles for sudden, explosive action. Why does a simple glance from a stranger trigger such an extreme physiological response in your body? Because in the ancient world, every single interaction was a matter of genetic life or death. The stakes for reproduction were absolute and unforgiving. The spark of attraction feels like undeniable magic. It feels like poetry and cosmic destiny. It is actually a brutal, cold calculation of genetic survival. Anthropologist Helen Fisher spent years deeply studying this exact neurological phenomenon. She put people who had just fallen in deeply romantic love into functional magnetic resonance imaging scanners. She desperately wanted to see what romance actually looked like in the deepest, most ancient structures of the human brain. The functional MRI results she found were not poetry at all. They were pure, unadulterated ancient chemistry. When you feel that initial spark of intense interest in a stranger, your brain immediately floods with dopamine. This is a powerful, highly addictive neurotransmitter that controls the most fundamental reward and pleasure centers of your central nervous system. It is the exact same chemical pathway that kept your ancient ancestors motivated to hunt massive, incredibly dangerous herbivores across the dry grass. It is the same chemical drive that forced them to risk agonizing stings to forage for high-calorie honey hidden inside hollow trees. Why does romantic attraction make you feel so incredibly obsessed and endlessly energized? Because nature desperately needed you to focus all your precious mating energy on one specific person. Nature needed you to maintain this intense focus just long enough to ensure the successful continuation of your fragile genetic line. You need this intense chemical focus to survive the harsh realities of prehistoric life. You need this boundless neurological energy to procreate and aggressively protect your vulnerable offspring. Without this overwhelming, intoxicating chemical cocktail, your lineage simply dies out and fades from the fossil record. Your biology does not care about your personal happiness or emotional fulfillment. Your biology only cares about your successful genetic replication. You think you are simply looking at a beautiful, pleasant face. You are actually conducting a microscopic physical examination for dangerous genetic mutations. Every single time you look at a potential partner, your brain is running a highly sophisticated diagnostic scan. You are unconsciously looking for absolute bilateral symmetry. This means that the left side of their face perfectly matches the right side of their face down to the millimeter. In the incredibly harsh environment of the prehistoric world, any physical asymmetry was a glaring warning sign. It was a clear biological indicator of severe parasitic infection, malnutrition, or catastrophic developmental trauma during childhood. A perfectly symmetrical face mathematically proves that this specific person survived the extreme dangers of early childhood without suffering any serious, life-altering illness. You do not consciously think about tapeworms or bacterial infections when you ask someone out on a date. Your ancient, deeply embedded hardware is doing all the complex mathematical calculations for you in the background. What other invisible, highly revealing biological signals are you broadcasting to the people around you every single day? You stand up straight to unconsciously show off your excellent skeletal health and spinal integrity. You smile broadly to demonstrate the formidable strength and calcium density of your teeth. You laugh loudly to show off your superior lung capacity and respiratory health. Every single casual movement is actually a desperate biological advertisement. You are constantly, aggressively selling your genetic fitness to absolutely anyone who will look at you. Consider the seemingly simple, everyday act of making direct eye contact. Humans are completely unique among all primate species in the anatomical design of our eyes. You have a bright, highly visible white sclera completely surrounding the dark, colored iris of your eye. Chimpanzees, gorillas, and other great apes have solid dark scleras that effectively camouflage the exact direction of their gaze. Evolutionary psychologist Michael Tomasello calls this unique human adaptation the cooperative eye hypothesis. In the dense, dangerous brush of the ancient African savanna, you needed to be able to see exactly where your fellow tribe members were looking. You needed to communicate highly complex spatial information without making a single sound that might alert a sleeping predator. The bright whites of your eyes specifically evolved to openly reveal your internal intentions to the rest of your group. When you catch someone intensely staring at you from across a crowded room, you are using a bizarre anatomical adaptation originally designed for silent, coordinated pack hunting. You are hunting for a highly compatible mate. Your eyes dart rapidly across the visual landscape of the room. You are constantly looking for sudden movement. You are looking for a rare opportunity. You are looking for someone who is already looking back at you. Are you fully aware of exactly how loudly your silent eyes are speaking to the ancient brains of the strangers around you? Imagine the terrifying, vast world long before cities, roads, and permanent agricultural settlements. You are living your entire life in a small, highly mobile nomadic band of hunter-gatherers. There are perhaps 40 or 50 people in your immediate, everyday group. You know absolutely everyone intimately from the exact moment you are born until the day you die. Robin Dunbar, a prominent British evolutionary anthropologist, discovered a fundamental cognitive limit in primate brain processing. He found that the human neocortex can only successfully maintain about 150 stable, meaningful social relationships at any given time. This hardwired cognitive threshold is now universally known as Dunbar's number. In the ancient prehistoric world, your daily dating pool was severely, almost fatally limited by this exact number. You could not simply walk into a bustling new town or swipe your thumb across a glowing glass screen to instantly find thousands of available strangers. How did you possibly find someone new to love when your entire known universe consisted of the exact same 40 familiar faces? You waited with desperate anticipation for the great seasonal migrations. You carefully tracked the massive, slow-moving herds of grazing animals across the continents. You followed the slow, predictable ripening of the seasonal fruits and nuts. You walked for agonizing weeks across incredibly dangerous, highly exposed terrain. You constantly risked sudden predation by giant felines and slow starvation just for the rare, fleeting chance to meet someone new. Once a single year, many different nomadic bands would finally converge at a specific, highly important geographical landmark. It might be a massive, crystal-clear freshwater lake or a highly fertile river valley during the violent spring thaw. This massive, chaotic gathering was the ancient, prehistoric equivalent of a crowded, deafening modern nightclub. You would finally see faces you had not seen since the previous year's migration. The cold night air would be incredibly thick with the blinding smoke from dozens of massive, roaring communal campfires. The sensory input of hundreds of talking, laughing humans was absolutely overwhelming and deeply intoxicating. How did you successfully signal your romantic interest to a complete stranger across the roaring flames and the dense crowds? You used the absolute earliest, most primitive forms of cosmetic chemical technology. You prepared meticulously for this exact moment for many long, grueling months. You traveled far out of your way to carefully gather highly specific, rare geological materials. You skillfully crafted specialized, delicate tools just for this exact purpose. You knew deep in your bones that this brief, chaotic gathering was your only real chance to secure a viable genetic future. You slowly reach into a small, finely crafted leather pouch securely tied to your waist. You pull out a heavy, dark lump of raw red ochre. This is a highly valued natural clay earth pigment that is incredibly rich in oxidized iron. Deep inside Blombo's cave in South Africa, careful archaeologists found many pieces of this exact same ochre that are definitively dated to be 73,000 years old. These ancient stones had deliberate, highly complex geometric patterns intentionally carved directly into them. This physical evidence definitively proves that ancient humans were fully capable of high-level complex symbolic thought and artistic expression. Your distant ancestors meticulously crushed this hard red rock into a completely fine powder. They carefully mixed this bright red powder with warm, rendered animal fat to create a thick paste. You smear it carefully and deliberately across your high cheekbones, your broad chest, and your muscular arms. Why are human beings so deeply, universally drawn to the intense visual stimulus of the color red? Red powerfully signals peak physical health, boundless biological vitality, and heavily oxygenated blood pumping through clear veins. It perfectly mimics the natural, involuntary physical flush of extreme sexual arousal and heavy physical exertion. Are you simply trying to look beautiful for this mysterious stranger, or are you aggressively trying to look highly fertile? In the brutal, unforgiving reality of the ancient hunter-gatherer world, those two abstract concepts were exactly the same physical thing. You want them to easily see your peak health from all the way across the dark valley. You want the flickering, orange firelight to perfectly catch the bright red pigment smeared on your skin. Visual cues and bright pigments were only the very first step in this highly complex prehistoric courtship dance. You slowly move physically closer to the specific person you are intensely interested in. You are not wearing synthetic, factory-manufactured perfume or artificially engineered chemical cologne. You are heavily wearing your own entirely natural, incredibly potent biological scent. This invisible, floating cloud of chemical scent carries a truly massive amount of highly specific, easily readable genetic data. In a highly famous, deeply revealing scientific experiment by Swiss zoologist Klaus Wedekind, dozens of women were asked to deeply smell cotton t-shirts that had been worn by different men for several consecutive days without washing. The results of this study completely changed our understanding of human attraction. The women consistently and strongly preferred the exact smell of men whose biological immune systems were vastly, fundamentally different from their own immune systems. This powerful subconscious preference relates directly to the major histocompatibility complex. This complex is a highly specific set of DNA genes that rigidly control exactly how your body naturally recognizes and violently fights off dangerous foreign diseases. Why does this tiny, invisible molecular difference matter so incredibly much for the future of your romance? Because successfully mating with someone who has a completely, radically different immune system means your future children will be naturally protected against a much wider, deadlier variety of ancient pathogens. You think you are successfully flirting with a witty, clever verbal conversation. You are actually heavily flirting with your white blood cells and your deeply embedded immune system. You lean in very close to deeply catch their natural scent in the cold air. You breathe in deeply through your nose. Your brain instantly, mathematically analyzes their complete genetic profile in a fraction of a second. You either feel a sudden, overpowering rush of deep attraction or a sudden, involuntary wave of physical disgust. The massive communal fire slowly burns lower as the long, freezing night progresses. The heavy, rhythmic pounding of bare hands on hollow, dried wooden logs slowly begins to echo off the canyon walls. Music was absolutely not just a casual form of light entertainment for your desperate ancestors. It was the absolute ultimate physical display of raw genetic fitness and bodily coordination. At the Dark Hole Fels cave located in southwestern Germany, dedicated researchers carefully unearthed a beautiful, tiny flute. It was meticulously and perfectly carved from the hollow wing bone of a massive griffin vulture. It has been carbon dated to be at least 35,000 years old. You can clearly hear the incredibly high, piercing musical notes cutting sharply through the freezing, still night air. People slowly begin to move their bodies in a circle around the dying flames. You confidently step forward into the flickering orange light of the central fire. You begin to dance with intense energy. Why is rhythmic movement so deeply, universally, and undeniably tied to human romantic attraction? Dancing requires immense, sustained cardiovascular stamina. It requires absolutely flawless, rapid physical coordination. It requires lightning-fast neurological processing to match the changing beats. By perfectly keeping rhythm with the pounding drums, you are definitively proving to a watching potential mate that your entire central nervous system is completely intact and highly efficient. You are publicly proving that you are so incredibly successful at hunting and finding food that you actually have massive amounts of excess daily calories to just burn on completely unnecessary, exhausting physical movement. You stomp your bare feet violently into the packed dirt. You spin rapidly and leap high into the cold air. You aggressively show them that your bone joints are perfectly strong and your leg muscles are highly explosive. Are you just happily dancing for pure emotional joy, or are you desperately dancing for your literal genetic life? You finally stop dancing, catching your breath, and you begin to actually speak to them. Complex spoken language was not just newly invented for shouting warnings at each other about rapidly approaching, hungry predators. Language specifically evolved over millennia for highly complex, deeply intimate social grooming. Your spoken words are the exact cognitive equivalent of great apes quietly sitting together and picking annoying bugs out of each other's fur to slowly build deep social bonds. You use incredibly soft, low, soothing vocal tones to lower their natural defenses. You subtly and unconsciously mimic their exact physical posture as they sit. If they lean in closer toward the warmth of the fire, you immediately lean in closer as well. This entirely subconscious, rapid physical mirroring builds incredibly rapid, deeply ingrained psychological trust between two strangers. What are you actually saying to them in the dark as the embers glow? You are almost certainly telling them a highly detailed, dramatic story. Storytelling was the absolute ultimate indicator of raw cognitive intelligence and high social value within the ancient tribe. If you can successfully hold the complete, undivided attention of the entire group with a truly captivating, complex tale of a recent, dangerous hunt, you clearly demonstrate superior cognitive ability. You demonstrate a flawless memory and high social intelligence. Raw intelligence was absolutely the sexiest, most highly desired biological trait on the dangerous prehistoric savanna. You use your empty hands wildly to emphasize your most important dramatic points. You rapidly change the exact pitch and volume of your voice to carefully build intense emotional suspense. You deliberately make them laugh out loud to release a sudden flood of positive endorphins in their ancient brain. You are literally hacking their central nervous system using nothing but your spoken words. For many tens of thousands of long, incredibly difficult years, this entire complex process of ancient courtship was remarkably, almost perfectly equal. Renowned anthropologist Richard Lee spent many long, grueling years deeply studying the isolated San people living in the harsh Kalahari Desert. They are one of the very last remaining true hunter-gatherer societies left on planet Earth. He meticulously documented a daily lifestyle that very closely mirrors the vast majority of our ancient human evolutionary past. In these highly ancient, deeply egalitarian societies, women regularly gathered up to 80% of the tribe's total daily calories through relentless, highly skilled plant foraging. Women were entirely, fundamentally economically independent from the men in the tribe. Because they successfully provided their own massive, highly reliable share of the crucial food supply, women had absolute, total autonomy over exactly who they chose to flirt with. They had complete power over exactly who they eventually partnered with and who they left behind. When exactly did this deeply fundamental, ancient biological freedom of romantic choice completely disappear from human society? The absolute greatest, most devastating tragedy of natural human romance was the sudden, catastrophic invention of agriculture. Farming was a massive, inescapable demographic trap. When your ancient ancestors finally stopped endlessly wandering and started deliberately planting rows of wheat in the mud of the Fertile Crescent, absolutely everything in human history changed forever. You suddenly, for the first time ever, had permanent, unmoving physical property. You had rigidly bounded, highly valuable land. You had massive amounts of surplus grain safely and heavily stored in giant, immovable clay pots. How do you successfully protect this newly invented, highly desirable wealth from being stolen? You must carefully pass it down only to your absolute legitimate, verified genetic heirs. Suddenly, overnight, human female sexuality had to be strictly, violently controlled and constantly monitored by the society to ensure absolute, undeniable certainty of male paternity. Rigidly arranged, loveless marriages were suddenly invented specifically to forge highly powerful economic alliances between wealthy, land-owning families. Natural biological love was completely, ruthlessly stripped right out of the fundamental human mating equation. True ancient romance was entirely replaced by cold, calculated economic transactions and legally binding property deeds. Anthropologist Polly Wiesner deeply notes that as ancient societies became much more rigidly complex and permanently settled, the daily networks of exchange totally shifted away from natural mutual aid. They shifted aggressively toward highly calculated, selfish wealth accumulation. For many thousands of years of recorded, written human history, the simple act of flirting was considered highly, extremely dangerous to the elite. It was seen as a direct, violent threat to the established agricultural social order. The radical idea that you should freely choose your own life partner based entirely on mutual, natural biological attraction is not a recent, modern invention at all. It is merely a desperate, highly psychological return to your deepest prehistoric hunter-gatherer roots. You sit quietly in a crowded, noisy, brightly lit modern coffee shop today. You are staring blankly down at a glowing, cold glass rectangle tightly held in your hand. You swipe your thumb slightly to the left. You swipe your thumb slightly to the right. You are brutally judging the complex genetic fitness of thousands of potential mates in tiny fractions of a single second. You are making these massive biological decisions based entirely on completely flat, two-dimensional digital pixels. Your ancient brain is desperately, helplessly trying to apply rigid Pleistocene survival logic to a completely cold, highly sterile digital world. You are completely unconsciously looking for the bright red ochre of perfect physical health in a heavily edited photo. You are desperately listening for the sustained cardiovascular stamina of the vulture bone flute in a brief text message. You are hopelessly trying to accurately smell a highly compatible immune system through a thick, impenetrable pane of modern Gorilla Glass. Modern digital dating feels so incredibly exhausting, deeply frustrating, and completely hollow specifically because it is completely, fundamentally unnatural to your ancient nervous system. Your biology is absolutely starved for the blinding smoke of the communal campfire. You lock eyes with someone across a crowded room, but it is not a modern romance at all.